Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Thursday's Dire Literary Series. And tonight, my guest is Gregory Wolos. And Gregory's brought his entire family here. He's got a lot of extended family as well, so that's awesome. Um, so what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about Greg. And here it is. So this is his website if you really want to know more about him. But over 100 of his short stories have been published in such journals as Glimmer Train, Georgia Review, Corti, Descent, Florida Review, The Pinch, Southern Humanities, many, Los Angeles Review, Pank, etc. Stories have earned numerous Pushcart Prize nominations, have won monetary awards sponsored by Descant, Solus, the Rubery Book Awards, Gulfstream. So as you can see, Greg has many books and stories out there to check out, and he has a new book, Teeings, which came out in 2024. So without any further from me, I'm going to turn it over to Gregory.
Hi, everybody. Happy you could come. I thank you for coming today. Yeah, I'm going to Tings. I have several short story collections out. Tings is my first novel to be published, and I'm kind of proud of it. It's taken a while to get out. Parts of it have been published before in chapters of various chapters have been short stories that have been published. I've adjusted them, changed them, shifted them to make them fit the novel. You're probably wondering where the title Tings comes from. T'Ings. It's a quote. It's my epigraph for the novel. It comes from a quotation by Bela Lugosi, who you might have heard of in a movie, but not Dracula, which is the movie most people associate with Bela Lugosi. This comes from a movie called The Island of Lost Souls, which is based on the W.H.G. Wells novel, Island of Dr. Moreau. Now, Bela Lugosi is Beastman. That's his name, Beastman. And if you would look at him, he doesn't look at all like the smooth Dracula. He's got hair sprouting out of his face. He's covered with hair. He's kind of slumped over. And he's a representative of all of the products of Dr. Moreau, because Dr. Moreau on his island is a vivisectionist. He's decided that he can play God, he can be a creator. So he takes animals and cuts them up, slices them up, stitches them back together, and tries to make them into humanoids. At the point that this quotation I'm about to recite for you comes, the animals have rebelled. The half animals, half man creatures have rebelled. They've got Dr. Moreau sort of cornered out in the middle of the jungle, and the beast man looks at him and he says accusingly, "We are not men, we are things. We are not beasts, we are things. You made us things." And Dr. Moreau ultimately does not fare well as a consequence of this. So the novel itself is, we'll see during the question and answer period, it's about the dangers of creativity, the dangers of playing God with our creations, and also who might suffer collateral damage of this, who might suffer direct damage, who might suffer collateral damage. The first part of the book is about one of the central characters is a director who makes slasher horror movies. He eventually makes a big hit movie called Kong's Daughter. It's a huge cinematic success, and that gives him permission to make some independent films. Unfortunately, one independent film he decides to make as his career moves along is called Svidrigaïlov's Dream, which I'll talk about maybe a little later. What I'm going to read from for you is a portion of not the first part, which is about this director, but about one of his indirect victims. The central victim is a little girl who becomes a celebrity slut, I guess would be, I hate to use the term, a celebrity victim, someone who's pilloried in the press ultimately through her career, named Amabel Hadley. She's asked to play a small part in one of his films, and he kind of abuses her psychologically, not physically. The chapter I'm about to read is from one of her super fans. 8 years has gone by since the film she tried to make with this awful director I told you about, but she has lots of fans, and this girl is representative of one of those fans. So if you can tolerate it, I'm going to play a 15-year-old girl suffering from alopecia. I think I can do that. You can accept that. And she is part of the collateral damage. This is chapter 8 of the book. It's the first chapter of the second part of the book, and it's called Smooth. Jenna Klein expected the tattoo parlor to smell like seared flesh and hot tar, but it didn't. It smelled like hand sanitizer and a little like nail polish remover, probably the ink. It didn't look like anything now because she had her eyes closed. Not everyone did lids. Almost nobody did lids. Laser, the proprietor of Laser's Tattoos and Piercings, did lids, but Jenna had to take 2 buses to get there. And she knew the minute she'd stepped onto the first bus outside her gated community that she'd forgotten her cell phone. She might as well have forgotten one of her senses. But since it had never, ever happened before, leaving her phone behind was a kind of message, wasn't it? Laser said nothing when Jenna told him she was 18, so though she'd just turned 15 last month. Stars of David, she said, 1 on each eyelid, $25 per lid. Duct tape covered rips in the arms of the chair she'd settled into, as if customers had been tearing at them. Won't you hit my eyeballs? I heard that you slide a spoon under. She shivered, imagining the spoon she'd plunged into her breakfast grapefruit, cupping her naked eyeball, its handle pressed into her cheek, her lid stretched spoon-shaped. No spoon. I'm careful, Laser said. He was squat, but a big squat, like a giant dwarf. His neck was short, and his head was square. Before she shut her eyes, he'd been fiddling with his inking tool, checking its sharpness on stiff paper. The apparatus worked with a foot pedal, like a grandmother's sewing machine. Yeah, she said, because you don't want me leaking out my vicious fluids. She imagined her cheeks wet with something like egg whites, like thick, sticky tears. I wish I could watch. Viscous, not vicious. Should I tape them down? It's hard to do that and tattoo them. You don't have to. What will it feel like? Weird, he said. You'll love it. Stars of David. Yeah, yes, she said, and held her breath. Had Laser noticed her lack of eyelashes? That she had no eyebrows? Did he suspect that she hadn't any pubic hair? That under her hot pink wig, her head was as smooth as a beach ball? Could he guess that she was devoted to the spunk and spirit of Amabel Hadley? I'm starting, Laser said. Okay. There was a hum, and Jenna patted her thigh, but her phone wasn't there. Then her lid was alive with the crawling feet of bees. On YouTube, she'd seen a man's face dripping with a live bee mask. Through the tickling, she felt the push and nip of Laser's tool. The first star was being formed. Soon there'd be a Star of David for each wink, double stars when she blinked. Amabel Hadley was Jewish and probably had a bat mitzvah. Jenna was Jewish too. Her divorced parents weren't religious, but she'd been to the bar and bat mitzvahs of relatives. She imagined Amabel Hadley's sweet voice filling the sanctuary as Amabel chanted her Torah portion. Those lucky enough to have been there must have died listening, but been reborn as something better, flowers or butterflies or stars. Amabel had recorded 2 CDs, but guitars and synthesizers drowned out her lovely voice. Hum. Jenna buzzed along with the tattooing. Hurts. The pressure of the tool's point lifted, and the bee dance stopped. And shush. Shush unless it hurts. I thought you'd use a spoon. No spoon, Mazer said. The hum resumed. In all the world, only Jenna had guessed that it was Amabel Hadley's hidden alopecia, not her problems with drugs and alcohol, that had kept her out of movies since her late teens. The celebrity's addictions were a front. The truth had to be that she'd grown tired of hiding her baldness. Amabel's disease was probably the most closely guarded secret in show business. Jenna knew the power of the secret because hairlessness changed the way you saw the world. You learned about hiding and intuiting. 15 was paradise, 15 and smooth, and she'd have stars and stars every time she blinked. Jenna had an idea for a tattoo of a pair of baby lips about to take her nipple. Unlike the voluptuous Amabel Hadley, she was flat-chested. Jenna's mother and her nana were also small-breasted women. But though a tattoo of a pair of baby lips about to take a nipple was a beautiful idea, how would you do it? Could you tattoo the indentation in the breast made by the baby's cheek? The tiny lips would be hovering in the air. How did you tattoo the air? Oh, sorry. Jenna's eyes teared, not from pain, but for Amabel and her secret suffering. She hummed a tune along with the buzz of the tattooing machine, enunciating the lyrics in her head. Little girl, my svitty pretty kid, such a pretty, svitty pretty kid. The words were the chorus to Amabel Hadley's only hit, Sitting Pretty. Not really a hit, but they played it on the radio. Near the end of the song, spoken but barely audible, you could hear Amabel sigh. I am the little girl of Svidrigaïlov's dream. Jenna might have ignored the line if she hadn't read the song lyrics that came with the CD. First, she saw that even though the title of the song was Sitting Pretty, it was spelled Svitty Pretty. Later, she Google searched Svidrigaïlov's dream. It took a long time to find because she had to guess at the spelling a million times. The Google search stated, first, 1, Svidrigaïlov, a Russian noble in Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment. Svidrigaïlov's moral decay is illustrated by a nightmare in which he rescues an impoverished little girl who transforms into a prostitute before his eyes. Second reference, Svidrigaïlov's Dream, a film begun by director Raymond Walchuk, see Khan's Daughter, Teddy. Production was terminated over accusations that Walchuk was making, quote, inappropriate sexual innuendos, end quote, to 12-year-old co-star Amabel Hadley. See Switcheroo, Penny Starlight Girl Astronaut, Celebrity Rehab, and Scaredy Cat Enterprises. The subsequent scandal settled out of court, effectively ended Walchuk's career, and helped establish Hadley's. First one's done, need a break? Jenna smelled blood now, faint through the odors of sanitizer and ink. Okay, keep them closed. Tickles and nips on her second lid. Jenna again reached for the phone she'd forgotten. I am the little girl of Svidrigaïlov's dream. That line, the beginning of history, was seared like a beautiful scar into Jenna's brain. That was about.
Hey, great stuff. So let me ask you, sorry I mispronounced the title as Tings.
That's okay.
So tell me a little something about jumping from short story to novel. Have you failed at writing a novel before? And I'm only saying that because I always hear you have to fail at your first one.
Well, when I was about 23, I decided I was going to be a writer. And every summer during vacation from teaching, I would begin a novel, write the whole thing, and be done with it. So there were about 3 summers when I did that before I had to start teaching summer school and get summer jobs and blah, blah. And they were all really bad. So I guess you could count those, but I never really wrote another novel for a long, long time. This is the first effort at it. But this took a long time because it grew out of the short stories. And the first short story it grew out of was one called Svidrigaïlov's Dream, which actually won a prize. It was won the Gulf Stream Award. What's the name of the guy who awarded it. He's a pretty well-known writer. Anyway, they won an award. It's a good story. And then I took that story and over a series of years worked from it, took its characters, wrote into the future of that story, wrote into the past of that story. And every year, among the 8 or 9 stories I'd write for a period of about 13 years, not 10 years, I had another couple of chapters and eventually pieced them together. The question is, how would I set them up and how would I structure them and what else would I need to write to paste them together? So the book went through several incarnations. First, actually started out as a story collection and then became a novel.
So I find that really interesting that short stories have morphed into a novel. Out of the novels that you wrote as a kid in the summers, has anything ever been morphed out of that? Do you borrow a character or an idea, or do they just get burned?
No, they're at the bottom of some landfill somewhere, and that's where they belong. But what I learned out of them was the endurance to write and write continuously. I mean, I was putting out $5,000 or $6,000. Yeah, I wish it was dollars. 5,000 or 6,000 words a day just to get a 100,000 word novel finished in a couple of months. So it taught me that kind of endurance. And now it's very interesting. The opposite is true. When I write short fiction, to write one short story, it's a month and a half of full-time work at least, or often longer. And that's full-time. That's writing, devoting my whole writing day to one short story.
Well, don't laugh at that misspeak, but people do pay $6,000 to get published these days. Anyway, there's a combination question, which I think about your writing process. So the first part is tell me about your writing process. And Lee says, can you speak a little bit the differences in your process from short stories to novels?
Well, yeah. Okay, that's an interesting question too. And it's a good question because I'm currently finishing on like the 5th draft and the last closing stages of the 5th draft of my second novel, which is actually also started out as a collection of short stories, but very closely linked short stories. And I knew it was, well, a publisher suggested it first, but I knew it was going to become a novel at some point. So the process is this. With a short story, at least for me, with a short story, I usually start out with a situation. I don't start out with the end. I had a discussion with someone the other day who said they started to the end and wrote to the end. I start out with the situation and then try to discover what the end will be. I find the end as I'm getting there. But usually, let's say I'm going to write a 20-page, 5,000-word short story. I'll start out with about 50 pages. I'll just write anything I can think of that's remotely related to the story. And then I begin to collapse it. And somewhere along the line, I discover, oh, this is the heart of the story. And then cutting everything out, cutting the chaff away, cutting the stuff that doesn't belong becomes easier and easier. So subsequently, then, draft after draft, I'll be reducing. And it's so interesting to see. I used to bring them into workshops and just say, so this is what I started with. Now, so this 50-page thing, and everything's crossed out, and they're virtually not a single sentence remains the same from the drafts. One thing that's good about that is I don't suffer a lot from writer's block. I just get it down. If I can get it down, I'm working, and if I'm working, then the next stages will eventually come. So that's sort of how that process is. The difference now for me, for novels, is, as I just described, a lot of my novels emerge from short stories that have been written about characters that repeated characters through the stories. So it's sort of an intent to sooner or later bring all those stories together. So that to me is the major difference. And then of course I'm discovering now, especially with the one I'm working on now, then the old process comes back and I've got to read the damn whole 400-page draft and go back and reconcile a 20-year period. Do I have the ages right of the characters? Do I have the maturation levels correct on characters who were developing through the stories? Do I have all of that straight? And then just keep rewriting and eliminating. And it's probably the motivation for why I write a story about creating, because I do feel the power of a god at sometimes in it, when that I can just like take a character that I've been holding on to for years and say, Tom, you're gone, goodbye. And I can invent a new character and give the new character, here you come, I got a new character. Well, that's my new next
Well, we
novel.
got
That's
a lot
next
of
time I'm on.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions coming in, so I want to try to get to all
All
of
right.
them. Lisa, you mentioned your writing day. Do you take breaks or write straight through your day? Because your process is totally different than mine in terms of like
Yeah.
word count and things like that. So are you going straight through?
Uh, I'll work for, I can't, I'll get up, I'll have breakfast, I'll settle down, I'll start writing around 9 o'clock. I'll go till noon or 1. That's as far as I can go with new stuff. And then pretty much then I'm thinking of the book the rest of the day. This is frustrating for people who are around me. But that's when I do a lot of new stuff. And I always have like one of my 10,000 little notebooks around with me that I can write stuff down with them as I think of it. But that's how that works.
So you're living with these books, right? So when you finish a book, do you miss the characters? Do you actually have a period of mourning at all?
They never leave. They don't. They're never gone. There's a room in the house that I haven't told my wife about where there's like 10,000 of these people milling around having their own conversations. Yeah, they're never really gone. In fact, the other end of that, there's a difference between the story itself and the published story. The published story I stay away from like the plague, and I've heard that that's common with writers. We don't like to look at our work in a publication and see it. I don't know if it's a fear of finding a huge error or a fear that the whole thing might have been an error to begin with. But yeah.
I get it. And part of a question here, did you find it easy to write the characters and things, and where did the inspiration for them come from? I think you already answered that in terms of the short stories. Were the characters easier to write?
When I have a hold of them, when I've gotten to that point in the work, the short story of the novel, when I've gotten to the point where I think I've gotten to the heart of things, then the characters become easy to write. The battle with the character is to avoid the stereotype. That's it. I don't even with minor characters. It's like you got to give them something of their own to make them not realistic, because none of this is realistic, but acceptable and believable.
So you write over and then you cut. Does an editor, after you finish your drafts, do they also cull it down more? Have you been involved in that process?
Well, that's a great question, because this particular novel, there was an epilogue that my editor, Candace James, who was invited but couldn't make it, for Silver Bow Publishing, she suggested that I cut the epilogue, and we didn't go back and forth that much, because I myself had been wondering whether to include the epilogue right along. And we both decided to cut the epilogue. So usually there's not much else that gets cut, I think. And with the short stories, very rarely, because I haven't had to object to it either, but I've spent so much time editing myself. I usually present pretty clean stuff. I think that wouldn't need to be cut further.
Are your drafts handwritten, or do you do everything on your keyboard?
That just changed because my Word screwed me the other day and I lost some stuff. But I usually
Microsoft.
Yeah. I had to print up the whole thing, all 400 pages again. I had to go out and buy ink twice. But usually I used to do everything longhand long time ago, but now I write a first couple of drafts and then print it up. It's with short stories, so I can do longhand corrections. I do that less and less as I start to reduce the story down. Then we'll do more corrections right on the computer.
Any of the characters based on real people from your life?
All of them. I mean, I give you the typical writer's answer. All of them are in some point, because they're all. Everything we do is part of our experience. So the only way we know what people are like is what we experience. And if we're going to translate that into something on paper, so some parts of all the characters, but I mean, if they're anybody, they're probably mostly me, So That's the only person I know really well. But no, I think not too many are actually real, unless I'm mimicking a character from like a work of literature or something like that, or in the case of Kings, from a horror story, something like that.
All right. Jay Riz says, are you still teacher? Because you're one of their all-time teachers. That's a great question.
Uh, I consider myself to be a teacher always, but in actuality, I've been retired for 15 years, and I enjoy my retirement. Although I'll miss folks like you, John. Uh, but it gives me time to write now full time. Being
Uh, were,
retired.
were you a big fan of B movies or like chiller theater? Was
Oh,
that
Monster Horror Chiller Theater, absolutely. And that gave me the opportunity to see things like Island of Lost Souls, which is, if you haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a long time, watch it again. It's terrifying. 1933, I think, or two. There are these great shots in the movie of when their animals are all rushing to where they're going to attack Moreau ultimately, but the camera angle is on their legs. And you see these legs walking by, and like one of them will be a regular leg, but the other one will be like a donkey hoof. They have like beast legs and features, but just from the legs. That's terrifying. But yeah, yes, I
so?
did watch horror movies.
Someone who's passionate about writing, what do you suggest in terms of eventually getting published? In terms of maybe individual pieces and maybe longer works? Tell us very, very briefly about quick suggestion.
About how to go about starting to get published. You mean
Yes.
going through that process? Yeah, I would say don't try to make things as polished as you can, especially shorter works. Send them out. Send them out. See if you get some criticism. See if you get some real criticism. Send them out to you can join Duotrope, something like that, which is a system that tells you who's accepting work when, and you could do most of that on computer now. But I would say one of the things is get the works out. I would do workshops. I would look for writers groups if you're having trouble, and trouble connecting with what it is you're trying to do and get it out. But that I think that's generally good advice, to get the work out when you think it's ready.
How difficult
People
was
ask
it
that question too.
How difficult was it to find a real publisher instead of self-publishing? Well, self-publishing, someone will call it independent publishing, so that's real
Yeah.
in its own right. I don't do it, but anyway, I just wanted to
Yeah,
clarify.
I haven't done it. I haven't done it yet, and I don't think I will, because once you get it, I think you've discovered too. Once you get a track record, then it's just a matter of mining those lists and publishers, and trying to find somebody who's compatible with you and what you work on and what you write. And you just hope you just hope they don't go out of print before they print your book.
Yeah.
Or go out of business before they print your book, because I've had that happen too with a collection of short stories that it was a great collection, lasted for about a year, and then the publisher went out of business completely. But I don't remember what the question was.
Have you ever had a negative experience with it besides it going out of business? I mean, that's kind of a negative experience. A negative working relationship with a publisher.
Yeah, absolutely. An earlier, I don't know how much to say about this, an earlier version of Kings, in fact, went to press. There's now a Facebook group for this publisher that has over 150 members. If you add up what he owes people for royalties and book purchases, I think it's about $25,000. He's since absconded to this publisher has since absconded to Portugal, where he runs another bookstore. There have been attempts to sue him. Everything else doesn't work. So that's the most negative. That's the most negative experience, and it's a big one. It was kind of devastating one, because as I said, it
So,
was an earlier version of this.
so if you can't sue them and you're under contract, can you just, without any without having it, can you just break the contract and be like, I'm putting the book out?
Well, I suppose you could. what was recommended, because we got those members of that group got a lot of like free legal advice along the way. And what we needed to do was, and the publisher did do this, is get a letter which he reverted our rights back to us. Most of the people in that group have had that happen, and once that happens, the book's yours again. So I got a letter, and Amazon wants to see that letter, or they won't take it off, and the publisher can keep collecting royalties on that book himself if you don't get it off of Amazon. So
Right.
you need that letter of restoring your rights to get it.
Right. Tell me about this.
Uh-huh. Well, where'd you see that?
Oh, I got a little bird message.
Oh, okay. I know now. Okay. I got it. I understand. Just had a conversation with the man last week, and he mentioned this. That is my new story collection, my latest story collection. It's being published by Pierian Springs Press, and it will come out in 2025. It's my fifth story collection, but it's a third. The title you saw was What the Children See, and it's kind of a trilogy with with two other collections. The Thing About Men and Women of Consequence. So we got the women, we got the men, and now we got What the Children See. And this is the last. In fact, the publisher said, "Do you think the cover is too dark?" He described the cover. That's the first I've seen it. He described the cover, and he said, "It's dark. You think it could be too dark?" I said, "You know that the quotation that governs my life is a work of literature should be an ice axe to break up the frozen sea inside us." I said, I live dark. So I just saw that title for the first time. I kind of like it. So I don't know. I can't see who's here. Is Kurt
he's here? He's here. So
Kurt,
also,
thank you. I like the cover, Kurt.
so the next novel that you're working on, do you have plans? Is it have a publisher yet? What do
No.
you have to do with that?
I'm going to finish it, which I really think will be done end of next week. Maybe, because I'm pretty much done. But it's going to take me probably another couple of weeks to write up the package that I'm going to submit to publishers, the cover letter, the query, the summaries, all of that stuff. That takes time too, and they pay a lot of attention to that. A lot of publishers will pay a lot of attention to that. So that's going to occupy some more of my time with that.
All right, so here's the cover. Gregory Wolos, thank you so much for answering our questions and reading from Tings. Tings looks like this. Some of his other books are way, way down. And check them all out. Go to his website. Google his name. Go to your local bookstore. Go to bookshop.org. Anything that works for you. But like, you know what? Buy some books. They're
There
great.
you go.
And thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Tim.
You're
Thank
very
you,
welcome.
Tim.
And for those that are watching the stream that want to come into the open mic, all you got to do is use the link and I will gladly let you in. So thank you for watching.